It started with a thunderous rip in the sky, the resonance cascade. From that moment on, nothing was the same. Portals opened without warning, tearing through the fabric of reality, and from them poured the twisted creatures of Zen. Head crabs, barnacles, and far worse things with names humanity had not yet invented. These portal storms struck without mercy, ripping through cities, forests, deserts. No place was safe. Entire towns vanished in an instant, replaced by alien landscapes or overrun by the nightmarish invaders. In a desperate bid for safety, survivors fled the countryside and rural zones, seeking shelter in the cities, hoping the walls and concrete would be enough to hold back the chaos. But it wasn't. Not for long. The world's armies fought street by street, country by country. But it was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with bare hands. Governments faltered, communications broke down. A newspaper headline from the time captured the grim truth. Global order fractures, nations buckling under the strain. Civilization as it had been known was unraveling, and still, the skies kept tearing open. They came through the rift like a silent storm, unseen, unstoppable, and utterly beyond comprehension, drawn by the uncontrolled dimensional chaos unleashed by Black Mesa. An immense interdimensional power, known only as the Combine, found Earth, and when they came, they struck with strategic precision and overwhelming force. No warning, no chance to prepare. In just 7 hours, the war was lost. Humanity's armies, every branch, every nation, fell before they truly understood what they were fighting. Tanks were crushed beneath towering, insectile war machines. Fighter jets disappeared in clouds of fire. Communications went dark. Cities crumbled. Civilians and soldiers alike died by the millions. The death toll remains uncounted, only guessed at in grim whispers. In New York, the United Nations Secretariat building stood as a symbol of global cooperation. It was one of the first targets. According to survivors and scorched photographic evidence, the building took direct hits from orbit. Massive kinetic strikes or energy projectiles that left gaping wounds in the steel and concrete. At least 2 Striders, grotesque tripodal engines of war, were seen tearing through its surface, their plasma cannons silencing the last human resistance in the area. As the war reached its final, harrowing hours, with cities in flames and humanity on the brink of extinction, one man stepped forward from the shadows of a shattered world. Dr. Wallace Breen, once the administrator of the now infamous Black Mesa Research Facility, had found a way to speak to the enemy. While Earth's defenses crumbled and the last radio signals dissolved into static, Breen initiated direct contact with the Combine, the very force responsible for the devastation. Desperate for any path to survival, the remnants of the United Nations gave Breen their blessing. He was authorized to negotiate on behalf of the human race, by any means necessary. And so, with no leverage, no army, and no hope of resistance, Breen struck a bargain. Humanity would surrender unconditionally. It was not a treaty, it was not a ceasefire, it was capitulation, an offering of Earth itself in exchange for the species' continued existence. The Combine accepted. In the aftermath, Dr. Breen was installed as the interim administrator of Earth, a title grand in name but hollow in power. Though he held the appearance of authority, Breen was little more than a mouthpiece, a carefully groomed figurehead for the Combine's will, a puppet draped in the guise of leadership. The so-called negotiation that ended the conflict was nothing more than a plea for mercy. But it was enough. The killing stopped, and the 7-hour war was over, and Earth belonged to the Combine. Even if humanity had been ready, even if every army on Earth had fully stood together, fully prepared and united under a single banner, it would not have been enough. The Combine was not a conventional enemy. They were an empire of infinite reach, forged across dimensions, wielding technology and forces that defied comprehension. Against such a foe, even Earth's strongest militaries would have been outmatched. When the last gun fell silent and the sky ceased burning, what remained of humanity was herded into the remnants of its own civilization. The Combine, in their cold efficiency, reorganized the survivors into walled city centers. Monolithic, gray bastions of control surrounded by towering walls and barbed wire. Outside those boundaries, the world had become something else entirely. Poisoned frontier. The portal storms had not only brought invaders, they had rewritten Earth's ecology. Forests once teeming with life were now crawling with alien predators. Rivers ran with strange iridescent sludge. The air in some regions shimmered with unnatural colors. The creatures that had crossed over from the other worlds, vortigons, antlions, head crabs, and worse, established their own twisted ecosystems. It was no longer dangerous to leave the cities, it was suicidal. Entire biomes had been consumed by the alien growths. Even the Combine, with all their power, rarely ventured beyond the controlled zones. What lay outside was wild, unpredictable, and hostile to humans, to Earth's original fauna and the Combine itself. Slowly but surely, the planet was dying. Where shattered highways met collapsing coastlines, the Combine built their factories of silence. One such place was Nova Prospekt, once a coastal prison, now repurposed into something far worse. The ruins of human infrastructure became the bones of the new regime, cold and unfeeling. Within its reinforced walls, the Combine carried out their most insidious work, the systematic dismantling of humanity itself. Captured civilians were shipped in by the hundreds, black-bagged, unnamed, forgotten. Inside, they were stripped of their identity, their memories scraped away like old paint. Some were twisted into the mindless labor force that had maintained the Combine's machines and architecture. Their bodies kept alive only to serve. Others were not so fortunate. They became soldiers. Through invasive surgery and biomechanical grafting, human beings were reshaped into something no longer human. Their minds rewritten, their voices reduced to sterile radio static. They were programmed to obey, to force, to kill, often without even remembering the faces of those who they once called family. With Earth firmly under their heel, the Combine turned their gaze not to rebuilding, but to extraction. They began to drain the oceans, siphoning the mineral-rich waters for purposes unknown. Once thriving coastlines became hollowed husks. Splintered piers jutted out from the cracked earth where water once lapped, all abandoned like forgotten relics. The air hung heavy with salt and silence, and the skeleton remains of fishing villages stood as grim markers of what had been lost. The shoreline stretched thin like old skin. Alien flora crept into the cracks, and the wind carried a dry scent of things that did not belong to Earth. At the heart of it all stood the Citadel, rising like a black spear from the center of City 17. It was more than just a fortress. It was the anchor, a monolithic link to the chain connecting Earth to the Combine overworld. But the portal storms have long ceased, and Zen no longer viable as a bridge between dimensions. The Citadel became Earth's sole tether to the vast and terrible machinery of the Combine Empire. It hummed with unseen energy. It pulsed like a wound in the sky. Through it, the Combine bled Earth. The Combine had done more than conquer. They had controlled, reshaped, and sterilized. One of their first and most devastating tools of control was a suppression field. Invisible, inaudible, and absolute. It spread across the globe like a deadly hush. Its purpose was simple: to prevent human reproduction. Children had not been born in years, the fading memory carried only by the old. No announcements were made, no explanations were given. One day, the craters were simply left empty. What remained of humanity was no longer growing, only aging, waiting to die out. People moved through their days in the haze, obedient, numb, and silent. The past was a blur. The future was forbidden. This was a new world. Sterilized minds, a sterilized species, and the ever-present hum of Combine machinery watching over it all.